All right, let's talk about overheating issues on the HEMI that we've been having and where we're at on it, and is it fixed? So since it's been installed, been having overheating issues on it. Very strange ones, I'll say. Going down the highway, it would come up in temp, and then as you got on the off ramp, it would come down, which you would think would be the opposite because you would have more airflow, but then you are loading the motor more. So as the motor comes down, it comes off more than idle, less loaded motor gets a chance to cool off. So I'll show you, this is a Griffin built radiator for it, custom built by Griffin radiators. And then here is the fan shroud that they built that was for it. All these had the black things on. They're taken off. I'll tell you why here in a minute. Now, the original fans that were on it were, drawing a blank now. The company makes all the fans out there. They were on it. They were about 850 CFM. The two that were on there, 10 inches, was what was on there originally. And this was the reservoir that I picked up from them that fits down in there. Smaller, but it was still overheating. So here's where we went with the setup. So we first started looking at, was it getting enough airflow, or were we keeping too much heat inside the engine compartment? Now this already has the headers on it, and the headers are wrapped with DEI header wrap on it, the titanium set up to try and cool the headers down to push the heat out of the engine compartment. So the first thing we did was we went with, we upgraded the fans, these Permacool. They're supposed to be like 2000 CFMs. With the setup, everything's kind of temporary put in because nothing, we were trying to figure out what exactly was wrong. And it was wired into the factory thermostat. I had made, if you watch the original install of it, made a bracket or a box out of aluminum. So this was mounted, so everything was running off the factory setup. And it was kicking on when it was supposed to. It kicking off, we were running about a 30-degree temperature drop across the radiator. Because that's what I was wondering. I'm like, is the radiator have a bad cross flow section in there or something when it was built? But we were getting a good drop across it, just not under load for some reason. Now I will tell you, it did sit in idle, and when my wife was talking to her friend, and it actually popped the high pressure side relief valve on the AC system. So it was still built in too high of head pressure on the AC, so it's an airflow issue across it. So what the roads we went down with it was we upgraded the fans. It was burping out of the reservoir too, so then we went up to this reservoir on it. One of these you get on Amazon, that mounted in here like this, which is kind of the picture you see when you go to look to buy these radiators, is what it kind of looks like. It still wasn't big enough. We were still burping past that. And since these motors do have expansion tanks built into the system, I was like, well, maybe it needs a bigger expansion tank. So we ended up building this one to go in there. And it pretty much took up that whole corner right there, but made this one to go in there. So then it was staying full though. So we were like, thought we were on a roll, but then when, that was before the AC happened, and the AC still happened. I'm like, well, that's not quite the issue. We had already taken this off, your engine cover, to try and cool it off. We had done the vent into the hood on it, mimic of the poison spider setup. They're back on now, but we had removed all the inner fenders, and we were gonna go to vented, but we just wanted to see if it would help. The B&M trans cooler, it used to be in the middle. Everyone's like, you can't have anything blocking the radiator. So we ended up, I moved this all the way over, and we actually wired another fan and put it in there to help. And it was helping some, but still overheating on occasion. And I'm like, it would just run a little warm where it was creeping up over halfway. And I'm like, that's just not right. You know, it shouldn't be like that. So took the bullet, I was actually going to go to a mechanical fan. I didn't want to run that setup. I'll give you another, as we were checking stuff, you know, I wanted to rule the motor out. So we ended up doing a combustion gas test on the coolant system and no combustion gas whatsoever. We did a compression test on every cylinder and they were all within 5 PSI of each other. And then we even did a bleed down test and all of them were, the motor was great, which is a low mile motor in it. So the motor tested great because I was concerned if we had a bad head gasket on it. So, and we even messed around changing radiator caps. This is because the normal one is, I want to say 19 PSI. We bumped this one up to 21, which is what is out of the RT cars. So I was like, well, the motor's out of a car, so let's bump the reservoir or the radiator cap up to match 21 to see if it'll help keep the pressure so you can bring the boiling temp of the antifreeze down. We even, you know, we were constantly checking the antifreeze, make sure it was right and there's right parameters. We even changed it over to a different, I'm trying to think what we were in first. It was for a 2009 setup antifreeze. It was I want to say it was the oat or the hybrid oat, and then we Go5 is what we had in it, and then we switched it over to the newer stuff. Flushed everything, switched over, checked everything, and we were still, you know, we're just trying to rule everything out, and we were still having overheating issues. The motor was good, the system pressurized, no leaks. It always tested really well. It was just an airflow issue. So we'd already got the biggest fans we could possibly put on there, plus a third fan. It was still overheating, so I was gonna go to mechanical. And then now what they run out of Jeep Speed Shop is they run the Camaro fan, which I had known about it. It's just a really expensive upgrade. It's gonna be well over $1,000 just for the fan setup. So, but we bit the bullet and did it. I think your fan shroud, which they send, is just this part here. There's no mounting tabs. You actually weld all your mounting tabs on based on your radiator configuration, which is fine. And then we added felt down in here, so when it pushes up against it, you know, nothing's making contact with the aluminum. But weld all tabs in. You're like $450 for that. And then they run a Lingenfelter fan controller that they have made for them, so you got to get that. And then that's another couple $100 there. The fan, an OEM one, man, I want to say that thing was like several hundred, 300, 400, 600, I can't remember exactly what it was. It was expensive. And then you get, that's its electronic controller, its thermostat electric that you got to add in for it to run. And then you buy all the wiring for it, and then you fuse and you wire it into there. But that's the setup we put on it. It's how the newer, was it 19 to 22 Camaros. Kind of hard to see down in there. There's not much room for it to fit, I'll be honest with you. Let me see. It's tight. But it does fit in there. And it works. It works great. To be honest with you, we were running it after we did it. We hooked up the computer on it and we were reading, when you kick the AC on, it runs, this is a variable speed one now, so when you kick the AC on, it's supposed to run at like 30%, and it was bringing it down. At an idle, it was steadily dropping it well into the 180s. So, and it would never do that before. So that's the setup we went to. If you're having overheating issues, or you got the mechanical and you're thinking about going electric, definitely the way to go. We're in South Georgia, so it can handle the heat. We ran all summer with it now. I wanted to make sure this was the right setup before we posted anything on it. The only issue I got with it is the this reservoir. We just stuck it in there. It's just too small. It doesn't quite have a big enough capacity for when it does exchange a little bit. So, but I see a lot of guys run these and they mount them, which I don't know if there's a different one out there. Something else out, they somehow put them in, well, I know they fit right in there, but let's see. I don't know if I can do it with the Canon on it, but they fit down inside there, but they're missing all this stuff. So probably got to cut all these off and weld them up and make them maybe stick out of the back might help, or I'll make something different, but still thinking about that. So where to put a bigger reservoir on it. But the Jeep runs great now and it's not overheating. So if you're having overheating issues like we were, we checked everything in the motor just to roll the motor out, and kind of everything was pointing at a cooling issue or an airflow issue. We did everything we could to maximize it, but it was really just the size of the fan is what killed it. So hope this helps you guys. If you have any issues out there with yours, or again, if you're thinking about putting one in, this is something else to think about on cost that you have to add into it, unless you're running the stock fan setup. But then I don't know how well it overheats, so, or if it will, how well it cools, I guess I should say. But comments, questions, leave them below.